I got some really good graphics and stuff like that. This is regarding dark matter. If you're not interested, continue on. But it really points out sort of the whole thing's a scam. I'm going to show you some beautiful graphics from Dr. Fatima from YouTube channel, which is very beautifully displayed. And there's a massive hole in the logic. So don't mean to put down Dr. Fatima because I appreciate the graphics and the explanation, but I really hope that Dr. Fatima examines what I'm going to be pointing out.
The graph I'm going to use to explain this is called a rotation curve, and it shows how the speed objects in orbit around something changes as they get farther away from that thing. So if we were to make a rotation curve of the solar system, for example, this axis would be each planet's distance from the sun, and each point's height would tell us how fast the planet is orbiting. And we have a trend. The further the planet is, the slower it orbits, because the force due to gravity, which is what's driving the orbit, gets weaker with distance. But it's slightly more complicated than that. The mass that gravitationally drives the orbital speed isn't just the thing in the center, it's everything inside the orbit.
Okay, here we go with Gauss's theorem. Basically, we got a blob of stuff. Let's say a body on the outside of the blob of stuff is attracted basically to, or is orbiting some sort of mutual center of mass in the middle of the blob of stuff. Now, if there is, let's say, another body, let's say to the interior body is only attracted or only gravitationally attracted to the stuff that's to the interior of the orbit of another body.
But because the sun is so much more massive than even all the planets put together, the difference in mass inside Mercury's orbit and the mass inside Pluto's orbit isn't that important. So the variation we see in this rotation curve is mostly just because of the changing distance. If we were to make the same graph for a galaxy rather than a solar system, we would expect the curve to look a little bit different because the mass isn't as concentrated in the center. The further you get, the more stuff you're orbiting, so instead of the graph dropping off quickly, it holds up for a while. But once you get to the edge of the galaxy where there's not that much more stuff being added, the graph should begin to drop.
Whoa. That's not correct. They're not just adding less stuff. You've forgotten all the rest of the galaxy. Let me show you. You're only taking this very small part at the edge of the galaxy here. You're forgetting something. What you happen to be forgetting is the rest of the frickin' galaxy. You're adding tons more mass that the object has to orbit. Furthermore, it does not trail off, but Shapley has shown that the luminosity profile remains constant as we go out from the galaxy. Here, let me show you. Okay, here's a photo of M10N, which anyone can take, and anyone can do this. Nevertheless, we take concentric rings. We look at each concentric ring of material, going from the exterior to the interior, interior to the outside. It makes no difference. What we find is if we see this, there's a lot more area here. It may be more spread out and more dim, but there's a lot more area. So we add up all the luminosity in this ring, all the luminosity in this ring, all the way through to the center. Each ring becoming smaller and smaller in size. And if we do that, find that the luminosity in each ring happens to be exactly the same. And of course, each ring is lit up by stars. Luminosity is caused by stars. And so there's the same number of stars basically within each ring as we move out. Therefore, the mass is the same as we move out on each ring. So the mass is consistently getting more in a linear way, going from the interior of the galaxy to the exterior. It does not drop off or less mass or anything like that, because as we've explained from Gauss's theorem, all the stars are in orbit and are gravitationally driven, as Dr. Fatima has just said, from the material that's to the interior.
Turns out, when we measure the speeds of the furthest out orbiting stars and gas in galaxies, they're going much faster than we'd expect, as if there was a lot more stuff inside those far out orbits than we can see. And that difference between the rotation curve we'd predict based on the mass of the matter we can see in the galaxy and the actual rotation curve we get when we measure how fast things are moving is what we call dark matter.
Okay, Dr. Fatima has explained it very clearly. Unfortunately, it's completely wrong, which we've just shown. So let's switch and do a little bit of algebra here. Okay, doing a little bit of algebra in high school physics. You can see on the first line, the mass enclosed by the orbit is equal to a constant times r. It's just increasing linearly as we go outwardly. E squared equals AR. That's from centripetal acceleration or circular motion. MV squared equals MAR, where small m is the mass of the star. So mass times acceleration is force, so mv squared is equal to the force from gravity times r. Then we have the usual Newton's equation. Force of gravity is equal to gravitational constant, mass of the star times the mass enclosed by the orbit, all over r squared. And we substitute that in. So substituting, we have this particular formula, which then means we can just cancel, 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 and rewriting gives us this formula, a nice clean formula which says the rotational velocity is going to be a constant. So now let's return to the diagram because we know the velocity is going to be constant due to Gauss's theorem, the addition of material and so forth. As we move from the center outwardly from the galaxy, we get a flat velocity rotation profile, which would look like this. So it now becomes pretty obvious that the prediction matches what we are seeing, what we have measured, therefore difference between them is 0, and there is absolutely no dark matter at all, and absolutely no need for dark matter whatsoever. So I've returned to Dr. Fatima's point that dark matter is a social construct. Yeah, SCAM is a total construct, but it's huge. It's just absolutely massive that all this silliness is talking about something that very simply does not exist, and there's absolutely no need for it whatsoever. This is a massive amount of misinformation, misleading, and just basically being dishonest with the general public. So I hope Dr. Fatima does go back, goes over what I've seen, and checks the amount of material is linearly increasing as we move outwardly from the center of the galaxy. And you can do all of those measurements all by yourself.